everyone, it's time for The Conversation, and joining me today to put into perspective a probable reopening and answering the key question, are we ready, are two guests. My first guest today is Susan Daria. She is an educationist. She is also a career expert and academic mentor. She serves as the Education Administration and Management at the University of Nairobi, and she's been doing this since 2015 to date. She's previously worked in education, administration, and management at the Kenyatta University from 2010 to 2015. She was a graduate assistant at Standard Chartered Bank 2007 to 2009. She holds a master's degree in project planning and management from the University of Nairobi and a Bachelor of Education from Kenyatta University. Our second guest is Amunga Hanyalala. He is an educational expert among many other titles. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making time and being here with us today. Amunga, I want to start with you. Do you think there's pressure on the government 6 months later to reopen our schools as is?
As you said, I'm Amunga. I've been a teacher for 25 years, both at high schools and at the university. And I'm working with the unions, the Kenya National Union of Teachers and the Kenya Women Teachers Association. And what I can say for now is that I don't think the schools are ready for reopening. I didn't imagine that we'll rush as a country towards reopening schools. I thought if we should have reopened schools, we should first reopen our economy. Let us start by opening up our economy. The curfews should have ended by now. The bars and the restaurants should be open full time. The churches should be open. Funerals should be attended by all if possible. It is only after we see the economy running that we can allow our children back to school and feel we are safe. As of now, I tend to think we want to use our children as guinea pigs. And for me, as a Munga and as a unionist, as a teacher, I want to say we are not ready.
Okay. Daria, I want to bring you in. Bearing in mind the current trend of COVID-19, all the information we have with regards to COVID-19 from government briefings, do you think that we are ready with regards to COVID-19 and handling it to reopen our schools?
Okay, Ondiro, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure once again to be with you at Metropole. Now, I'll concur with our other panelists that as a country, we are not ready. We are not ready because when we speak both as Kenyans and as parents that our kids are going to be used as guinea pigs. We can't be opening up schools to see how the economy is going to be affected or to see how the disease spread is going to be affected. Yet we don't have statistical data to see whether the closure of schools actually affected the spread or slowed down the spread of the virus. So basically, we are working blindly. The government is working blindly to see whether they can actually have children go back to school for whatever reasons. There could be pressures coming in. Like when you look at the education sector, we've had so many job losses from the teacher sides. So many livelihoods have been affected, and it trickles down to the economy. And then you can also when you look at the medical side of it. The infections are not as much in the children compared to the adults. Even the transmission rates are not as high in children compared to adults. So maybe they're looking at it like it's a catch-22 situation. But when you look at our situation as a country, I don't think we are ready because basic things like the infrastructure is not there. It isn't. It just isn't. We shouldn't lie to ourselves that we will do it while. No, because it's a health issue. It's a do or die. And putting children in such risks, I don't think is fair for the government to actually force parents to take their children back to school.
Amunga, I want us to pick the point that Daria has made with regards to infrastructural capacity that we might need to bring back our children to school. With regards to the number of schools and even the number of classrooms, we've heard the CS Education Magoha say we do not have the capacity. Hence, what's the logic when it comes to taking back children to school with regards to the infrastructural capacity that we will need to actualize this?
I think the logic is, and what Magoha and other stakeholders are really thinking about are exams. They're thinking about the candidates. They're thinking about Standard 8 and Form 4 students. They're thinking about a lost year. They're trying to save a lost year, academic year. And that's the logic they're trying to run around with. that we must do something. We must have exams running. We must have the schools running so that we can talk about an academic year. And so the academic calendar is what is the logic. Those stakeholders you saw at KCD the other day were mainly concerned about the academic year, the calendar, and the exams. That's what's driving them. And other things are about the CBC, the new curriculum called the CBC. The CBC curriculum, if this will be a lost year, then the CBC curriculum actually goes down to the dogs because it will not work. It will have been overtaken by events. So these guys are running around like headless chickens simply because they feel they don't want to lose those 4 things. The problem is they don't involve the child. You know, education is about the learner. You look at our learners in our schools, our children, you ask them, we are going back to school to do what? You know, at first, and the confusion that you've seen in the ministry, the kids are feeling, in those stakeholders that we saw at KIC, we didn't see any child. We didn't see a university student there. We didn't see anybody from the TVETs there. We didn't see anybody from Kenya Institute of Mass Communication there. We only saw old people like me who have been in the game for long, taking care of their interests. And that is where the problem is in this country. The disconnect is we leave out the learner. And anytime we leave out the learner, we are lost.
Daria, you put a very interesting post up on your Facebook, and you were saying you're trying to talk to your little kids about resumption of school. I want you to talk to us from the perspective of not just an educationist, but as a parent, about the welfare of the learner as we talk about a probable reopening.
Okay, I listened to my daughter with her classmates. They had just finished a class with a teacher, and they were discussing the possible reopening of schools, and they all said they didn't want to go to school because they basically know COVID is not over. You know, the updates are still ongoing. And when you look at situations where boarding school is more candidates going to school, most of the schools have boarding for candidates. And the social distance even with the sleeping arrangements is an issue. When you look at simple things like, let me look at the infrastructure. We need running water in schools. How many schools in this country have running water? Something as basic as that. How many schools have running water? Sufficient enough to have the students actually come to school. Look at things like sanitation. Look at things like provision of masks. Now, when I talk about masks and maybe sanitizers and all that, we are looking at a situation where the government is probably saying they're going to provide that. But to what extent and for how long? We've heard the government saying that they'll provide sanitary towels for girls. How far did it go? How effective is it? Let's even begin from there. How effective is it that these provisions are actually going to reach the user, the intended user? Our government has a history for that, so let's not even go into that. And then we've heard the stories about desks being prepared for schools, desks that are COVID compliant, and we are wondering, are they being distributed across all schools? Or are they just selected schools? And if they're going into selected schools, what happens to the other schools where students are still expected to report, but they don't have the provision of these COVID compliant desks? And if the desks are not even ready, why are we rushing our children to school? I mean, put the infrastructure in place first. When you look at a place like Germany, I was talking to you about Germany, where students are tested every 4 days. There's some states in Germany where students are tested every 4 days for COVID. You see, the COVID has been here since around March. In Kenya, I've not been tested. So we don't even have those basic provisions. Do all schools have sanatoriums where in case there's a case, in case there's a COVID case, how is it going to be handled? Do we have enough teachers for that? We've had so many job losses during this period. So when you look at such situations, do we have enough manpower for that to handle such cases? How many schools have medical personnel, even the boarding schools? How many schools have medical personnel? I sit on many boards. Most schools employ matrons, not nurses. You know, so if our hospitals are stretched, where are we getting the medical personnel to get into the schools and take care of the medical issues that may arise in the schools? I mean, let's not cheat ourselves. We're just being. Magoha is not listening to all stakeholders. This thing doesn't just involve the Ministry of Education. It doesn't just involve the academic calendar. It doesn't just involve, you know, those stakeholders at his level. We have the parents and children. who have to be listened to. So
Okay.
what will happen if parents don't take their children to school? Is he going to sue the whole country? You know,
Good
there are some
question.
things he has to look at
Yeah.
practically. Yeah.
Amunga,
Yeah.
let's pick
Speaking
up.
as a parent, that is.
Let's
Yeah.
pick up what Daria has just said, and she's saying we do not have the right capacity to jumpstart education in this country. So I want you to paint a visual picture, because talk is rife in the Ministry of Education that there could be a probable reopening. For us to reopen, in terms of classrooms, what kind of capacity do we need to reopen, and in terms of teaching staff?
Yes, I am a chairman of a BOM of a school, a public school here in Nairobi. And the other day, I was called to the school and informed that we need to talk about the opening of schools and the things we are putting in place. And this is the picture I can paint for you. A school in Nairobi, I have almost 1,000 students in that school, a high school, and I'm being told to put water points all over the school to ensure there's running water, to ensure there is soap, to ensure there'll be social distancing in my school. A school whereby I have got 60 kids most of the time in a class. So they are all squeezed in those classrooms. The dorms are congested. The sleeping places in that school are congested. Now I'm being told that I should do what? I should ensure that those schools have got social distancing. Now I want to say this. Let the ministry, the picture that we have out here is very different from the picture that the ministry is giving the rest of the country. The picture down here, as a teacher, as a BOM chair, as a unionist, as a parent, I can tell you we are not ready. It is bad. We cannot ensure and enhance social distancing in our schools. We don't even have those toilets. In fact, I was asking my members of the board, do we need desks, or do I first need to put up toilets? Do I need to put water points? I tend to think water points are more important in that school than even the desks, because somehow that is what's going to be the biggest tricky part, sanitation. And then we also told to get thermal guns. We have been told to ensure that we have enough teachers. From where? My school employs 12 teachers on board. We've not even been able to pay them the last few months. Many of them have given notices that they'll not come back. So already we will have shortages of teachers. I am simply saying the picture is grave. I said on another TV station recently that Magoha and his ministry are so good at fake news. And that's what I'm accusing them, to stop fake news when it comes to education matters. Things are different on the ground, but they paint a very good picture out there when they stand on the stairs. And I'm saying, no, we are not ready. We can't reopen yet. And if we are hit, like England, I mean the UK,
Yes.
they just closed. We just got reports they have closed again. They reopened and they have closed. And many other countries. Now we are worried. What if the kids report in school and you hear after 3 days, Alliance Girls has 10 cases, Starry Boys have 5 cases, Olympic Primary School has got 10 cases. No parent will ever believe this government. No parent will ever want to take their child to schools again. Magoha, be careful before you reopen schools.
I also want to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the education sector, but in the private school category. Daria, I want to find out from you, from where you sit as an educationist, what would you say has been the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on private schools?
Okay. In our country, we have 2 types of private schools. We have those that are owned by the proprietors, and then we have these private schools that mushroom in the
Slum settlement, informal
estates.
settlement.
Yes. No, even in the estates, even in these other estates, where people rent out their spaces, and somebody comes up with a school in it. Now, private schools, first and foremost, I think they were the worst hit initially because of the job losses. They depend entirely on the income that comes in from school fees from the children, So they were hard hit by that. There's the job loss. We can't run away from that. And then that goes down to the economy. For them to pick up will actually be difficult. You've heard Amunga saying that on his board he employs teachers, around 10 or 12 teachers on board, and ever since we closed, we were not able to pay them. So how are these parents surviving? These are people who have families. How are they surviving? And then most of these schools have closed down. Because as a landlord, looking at it from the landlord point of view, I will want you to pay for my space, whether you're operating or not, you see. And as if I'm not getting in money as a school, as a school head, I mean, most of them have shut down. We've seen schools turning into businesses like chicken business because the landlord wants to make their money. So you remove the school. And now when schools reopen, what happens to such schools? What happens to such students? Where do they go to? You know,
and that
now,
begs the question, is the government prepared? Is the government prepared for the number of students we will see moving from private schools to public schools? One, because Magoha says, if you can't afford a private school, go to a public school. And two, because parents, their jobs have been affected and also the schools have been affected.
Ondiro, even before COVID, we couldn't manage our numbers in our schools. We couldn't. Both in public and private schools, we couldn't manage our numbers. So telling people to go into the public schools is, it's a fallacy, let me put it that way. It's not gonna work. My daughter yesterday told me, Mom, we are 60 something in our class and there are 4 classes for class 8. So that's 240 something pupils, you see. That's just one class. You can barely have space to move as a teacher. So which space is this they're going to use to take in students from the private schools? One. And then secondly, where are they getting the extra manpower to actually handle that extra influx of students into the public schools? Yeah, we aren't prepared for that. And then I don't know whether the government is looking at the flip side of it, but let me talk about the other private schools that have actually managed, those that picked up. I'll give an example of Kabarak. Kabarak High School is ready for exams. They picked up. They started off. Their Form 4s are ready to do exams. They did their online learning, kawaida, and it brings that actually also now widens the gap between those who could afford to go into the technological infrastructural way and those who couldn't. You see, so private schools have actually they've been split into 2 totally. Yeah, and that's something the government actually really needs to look into.
Amunga, as you pick up,
we are going to survive this.
Okay. Amunga, as you pick up Daria's point, I also want us to discuss the place of private schools in Kenyan education. We need them. As Daria says, public education alone cannot handle education in this country. How do we then ensure that as we gear up towards a reopening, we empower the private schools that are struggling, resuscitate the ones that have fallen off the wagon, to ensure that all the kids are taken care of?
Very true. I agree with Daria, what she says. What Magoha said the other day about that if you can't afford private school, just take your child to public. That was an insult. That was not even a good word. I tend to think that was very bad. Because private schools have played their role in this country. Let me say this. Before, when the colonialists came, all education in this country was private. Most of these schools you see, the alliances, the whatever, they were all private because they were owned by missionaries, they were owned by churches. All the schools you see, Bahati Girls, all the schools you see, there were very few schools owned by government. In fact, there were only 4 high schools that time, in 1930, 1940. So private education is what has given us what reached us where we are today. Government has tried to make public schools that were private. Most of these good schools that we see, Mango High School, they were first private under the Catholic Church. Now let me say this. We can't run away from private education, private schooling. No, run away. No country in this world can do it. Because they fill in a vacuum that government doesn't fill. And as Daria has put very correctly, private schools have already, not only Kabarak, talk about Sunshine, talk about Riara group of schools. My children, one of my child is at Riara. Talk about Apostolic Carmel. These are private schools. These guys are doing exams. I paid exam fee for my daughter the other day. She's doing exams. They are learning in private schools. Now, what that means is this. If you really want quality education in this country, you may have to think about private schools. And that is the gap they are filling in this country. And we can't run away from it.
Okay.
They're doing a good job. Some of them may be messing. In every situation, there'll be some that are not good. Some may be compromising the standards. But the truth is, they're doing a good job.
Okay.
And we cannot run away from it.
Amunga, I have under a
Can I
minute.
say something?
I have under a minute left, so I want you to take
Oh, you
this.
have under a minute.
Yes, very briefly. This far, what measures
Yes.
do you think the government has put in place, if there are any? And if there aren't, what measures should they put in place to prepare for a reopening?
First measure, open up the economy fast. Reopen the economy quickly. Stop these curfews. Make sure that now Kenyans can gather in bars, can gather in markets, can gather in funerals before you start talking about opening schools. You cannot start experimenting with schools. Start with the rest of us. Let Amunga go to take his beer in his local bar. And that one now you can allow my daughter to go to her school. Otherwise, I will say we are not ready. Number two, fund those schools. Can you provide money? As I speak as a BOM chair, money has not reached my school. Free public secondary school education money has not reached my school. I'm speaking about a government school. Number four, number three, employ more teachers. Can we have more teachers on board? Or can we have more teachers recruited? And finally, Magoha, stop giving fake news. Start now talking like a person who knows what's happening on the ground.
Okay.
Reach out to some of us, we tell you. That's all.
Daria, 30 seconds. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? You know, we are still in the middle of the quagmire. I wouldn't really say we are out of it. We are yet to get there. And one thing, we have to keep the continuous education and sensitization. Whether we actually get our students into school or not, it has to continue. Like the gospel, you know, it shouldn't stop. And then beef up our health systems. It's time schools will look at the health sector within the schools seriously. It's something that has to be looked into, both from the education. Magoha is a medic, you know. Yeah, he should stop acting like the politician he's becoming. And remember that he's a medic, and what you're handling is a medical issue. It's not just academic, you see. And then we have to look into the mental health and the psychosocial support, both to all stakeholders, parents, children, teachers, because our teachers are going to become essential staff.
Okay.
They're not just going to be teaching. So that's an issue that has to be looked into. They have to be empowered to actually handle what is coming before we think of opening the schools. And then we have to invest heavily into technology across board, all the way into the higher learning institutions. Those that got into technology immediately have almost survived. We have institutions that closed down because they didn't have the technological infrastructure. That's an area or a sector that the education sector has to really finance, downward, all the way from down upwards. You know, let's not just have these laptop promises that don't happen. And then when COVID hits us or something else comes, we start talking about technology and looking for funds for it. No. Thank you.
Yeah, Susan, Daria, and Amunga, thank you very much for making time. Those were their views. When we come back after the break, Social Watch will sample some of your views. Stay with Metropole TV.